What's up everyone, and welcome back to the channel. This week we are going to be recreating the Hasselblad 500EL data camera. And apparently this is the camera that was used on the Apollo 11 moon landing mission, when humans walked on the moon for the very first time. So technically this is the first ever camera that was on the moon. Now I say apparently because, as you may already know, the moon landing is one of the world's biggest conspiracy theories. Now I'm not going to be debating whether or not they actually went to the moon in 1969. I'll leave that up to you to decide, but today we are going to be recreating this camera from that historical space mission. So the first thing to do was find reference. So I jumped on Google Images and found some references. I believe these were from the National Air and Space Museum, but there are tons of other images on Google as well, so you shouldn't have a problem finding any reference if you want to recreate your own. So my goal was to basically recreate this camera from these reference images. And what I loved the most about these images were the materials on the camera. It looked very used and worn, and I thought recreating the camera for this week's video would be a lot of fun. So here we are. Now I will have to play around with the shapes a bit to get this right. We don't have dimensions or measurements, so we're going to take our time blocking things out and try not to rush into all of those fun details. Also, as usual, this video will be available in real time along with the full UV mapping process and all of the working files. So if you're interested in seeing any of that, you can find it all on my Patreon page, which will be linked in the description below. So this week's model is more or less going to be just a high poly model. I definitely did not have time to create two meshes for this one, and only had about a day to complete it. Now because of the short time frame, I definitely had to rush a few things, so there's a lot we could have done differently when it comes to optimization or topology, but we will go over that more later on in the video when we go over the UVs. Now you may already be able to tell, but I am starting on the side of the camera. If you look at the reference photo, you can see how one side extrudes outwards, and it's actually different than the other side of the camera. This seems like one of the more trickier shapes with this model, so I just decided to start here. I also thought it was one of the more larger objects, the main camera body shape. So if I start here and I get that main body shape complete, then I can slowly start to add all the other objects around it. So bear with me, we don't have a lot of time to get this one done, so let's continue blocking out those main shapes and slowly piece together our Hasselblad camera. All right, so here is the Hasselblad camera in its finished form. Now, everything is basically the exact same. I did do a few small things throughout the UV mapping process, which of course you can see on my Patreon page. I will upload that full video there. But basically everything is the same. The only real thing I added were some small booleans into this small piece. I noticed in the reference photo, you can kind of tell that there was a hole there, and rather than just adding a bump effect into my materials, I thought adding that into the geometry would just give me some better results. So I just quickly added some small screws and cut out or booleaned out some small holes. Everything else is basically the exact same. And what I decided to do was break this thing up into 3 different groups for the 3 different textures I have applied. Now I do have a 4th group here, and I will go over that in a second, why I actually separated these, but there is only 3 materials applied to this object. So the very first one is basically the main body. So as you can see, I made sure that all my shells were fairly straight, so there's no warping with the materials, and it made applying materials really easy in Substance Painter. And I just decided to separate this one on its own. Now, as you can see, I added a few small details on the insides. I thought having a render or a shot with the actual pack on the back separated from this whole camera would be cool. So I just really quickly added these tiny little hinges and this thing here that was in the reference photo. And the second group is the lens and a couple of the other small objects. So I added these front ones here, this tiny little object on the side, as well as this little Velcro piece. Now, originally I wasn't actually planning on adding that, and I was just experimenting, and I decided just to add it at the end. And so it's pretty random, but it was in the reference photo, so I thought it would be important to add. Once again, trying to prioritize all that UV space so I can get the most out of my textures. And the very last group are these 2 groups here, and this is just the pack on the back, as well as a few of the other labels. Since they were repeating from this, I thought just having those on this texture set would make sense. Now, the reason why I separated these 2 was that because I wanted to create a second scene for some extra renders, basically just took this battery pack and duplicated it a few times. So then I could hide this one, and basically those stickers would still stay on this object so it wasn't hidden. And then I just positioned these in the scene so that way, like I said, we could have another cool render of the pack actually separated. Now I did add these as well. It was in the reference photo, and it wasn't on the camera for some reason. It was just on some other references, so I decided to add these onto these packs. But they're sharing the same UV space as this one, so applying materials was really easy in Substance Painter. Now, I did say at the very beginning of the video that there was a few things we could do differently, or actually a lot of things we could do differently if we were making this for a game engine or we wanted to optimize this model. As you can see, I basically took these objects and just smoothed them out, added some subdivision so it was nice and smooth, which adds a lot of polys to your scene. And there's lots we could do, especially with this little Velcro patch. I just added a bunch of lines and then basically extruded them outwards to create these little tiny points. I really didn't know how I was going to create this Velcro patch, and I just decided to do it like this. But obviously this is a crazy amount of polys, so we could really simplify this by having a very small cube and adding some sort of bump effect in Substance Painter. So one of the first things I would cut from this model or redo if I really wanted to cut back on polys is this Velcro patch. Also, a lot of things like these little things, for example, these tiny little slider things on the lens, this could easily just be a cube and a simple shape. I actually add, like, these are combined to have that kind of bevel effect, like it's one piece, which looks really cool, but once again, it adds tons of polys. So this could be simplified and you can save tons of polys just on these alone. And also some other stuff like these spheres. You could cut back on polys on all these spheres and it could look fairly the same, and you can just save on tons of polys in your scene. Now, one of the things I did want to add were those small screws that you see screwed onto these panels. And to be honest, if I had more time, it would have been fun to create some tiny booleans, but of course that would be very time consuming. So I just decided to cut that corner and not add it into the geometry, but just add it into the materials and Substance Painter. So that's the one thing I kind of left out, which I wish I added. Since it's so high in polys, we could have just simply added some more booleans. There's no point adding more polys since it's already so high in polys, but like I said, just ran out of time. Now, of course, there's other things you could do as well, like these Boolean holes. You could just add that as a black circle into the materials so you can save on polys. You can also not have a hole through here, and you can just simply have a black circle like there is a hole. So you can fake a lot of these details, especially these lines on the back. I smooth this whole object out, which of course adds more polys to your scene. So all of this smoothing I did really does add up the polys. So I just wanted to make a note of that. Also, another big thing is things like this. So as you can see, this is like a panel sitting on top of this panel, but there's just unnecessary polys behind this. And I didn't have time to go through and delete it, but to be honest, there's so many faces here that we could easily delete and you wouldn't even know they're there, and they take up a pretty large space on my UV map. So that's a lot of real estate that I'm taking up for nothing. So keep that in mind when you are modeling and you want to cut back. All of these panels, everything behind these, I really could have just saved on polys. Now, one thing that I did change halfway through was these panels. So originally I thought they were metal panels sitting on top, and then I realized they were kind of cut out. I didn't know if they were actually like extruded outwards or if they were extruded inwards. So this side, I did the extrusion on the inside and on the front, but I decided to keep the panel on this side. I wasn't really sure what was right and wrong, and it just saved me a lot of time doing it like this rather than creating the actual extrusion. So you can't really tell a difference, I don't think, in the materials, but that's one thing. As you can see, this side's different than this side. I just added more detail on this side of the camera, whereas this side I just kind of kept it simple and just put this right on top of the geometry. Anyways, that's just a few of the things you could do. There's lots you can cut back on if we really had to, but creating high poly models is always fun. All right, so now the Hasselblad camera is ready to texture. So all we have to do is export this camera. We can jump over to Substance Painter and we can start our texturing. All right, so now jumping over to Substance Painter, we can go ahead and load in that FBX file from Maya. So when it comes to the textures, I'm more or less just gonna keep this one pretty straightforward. All I'm trying to do is recreate the image from that reference photo. So unlike other models on this channel where we explore different materials and we just try things and see what works and what doesn't, this one I'm more or less just trying to recreate from an image. So it's gonna make texturing a little bit easier for myself rather than exploring different things, but I do need to recreate all of those labels. So beforehand, before starting this texturing, I jumped into Photoshop and recreated some alphas, just more or less creating the text that I see in this reference photo so I can have similar labels for all of those little stickers and stuff like that. Now, once those alphas were complete, I was more or less ready to start texturing. So we're just gonna start filling in these meshes with other smart materials. To get it fairly close to my reference photo, I don't need to worry about getting it perfect right off the bat. In fact, I don't like just dialing in texture right off the bat, because I find once you start adding materials around that object, it can start looking a little bit different and it's just gonna drag on the texturing process. So what we're gonna do is just fill up these white empty meshes with materials, and then afterwards we can start refining them and get them closer or more accurate to what our reference photo looks like. Now, every material that I use in this video is actually from Substance Painter. So there's nothing that I downloaded off of the Substance website. So everything should be available to anyone that's following along in this video. I just more or less use smart materials to start as some sort of foundation, and then I slowly start adding different grunge effects or masking effects to them to add all that detail. Also, another really big detail on this camera that jumped out to me were all of the residue from those stickers. As you can see on both sides of the camera, there was some sort of sticker that was ripped off and you can see all the residue, and I really like that look. So all I'm gonna do for that is just jump on Google Images and search up some sort of sticker residue or torn sticker. I can bring that into Photoshop to make it black and white so it's some sort of alpha, and I can simply just paste that directly onto my mesh to create that sort of sticker effect. So I created 3 different alphas for this torn sticker, which I can just paste in different locations to kind of create that similar look. So let's just slowly start adding some materials to these empty meshes and we can slowly texture our camera. And don't forget, this whole video will be available in real time, which I will be uploading to my Patreon page, and you can find that in the link in the description below. All right, let's start our texturing. All right, and that is everything. That is the whole 3D modeling, UV mapping, and texturing process that I did to create this iconic Hasselblad Apollo 11 moon landing camera. I really hope you guys enjoyed this week's video, and if you did, hit that like button, and please consider subscribing to the channel to see more random weekly 3D models. And as always, a massive thank you to all of my patrons. You guys are all amazing, and I really can't thank you enough for all of your continuous support. And don't forget, this full video, along with all of the working files, will be all available on my Patreon page, which you can find in the link in the description below. All right, thanks so much for tuning into this week's video, and I hope you all have a great week, and I will see you in the next one.